Hi everyone, Cheska Cat here, and today I'm coming at you with a video about how I made my Lady Dimitrescu cosplay, or she's other known by as Lady D. I'll also be going over my experience at the Socal Retro Gaming Expo that I went to this weekend that was in Ontario, California, and the general fun there and what the results were of the cosplay contest I entered in this said cosplay. I'll also be looking off screen quite a bit at my computer because I made this cosplay back in October of last year, so I'm looking at the old videos of my process of making it. Also, a lot of these videos are going to be in vertical view because this was back when my YouTube channel got removed for no reason. So I was only uploading my crafting videos on TikTok, so hence why they're in vertical view. But I'll do my best editing efforts to try and make that look as best as I can. I'm not the best editor in the world, but we'll see how we can work with that. I'm a self-taught seamstress. I did take one sewing class. It was a costume theater class where I learned the basic of sewing, but other than that, I haven't taken any pattern making classes, how to make a pattern. Basically, I needed to find a sewing pattern that I really liked. So I went on Etsy, looked at the different options I had, and I found, I think it's pronounced Pretzel Cosplay's pattern on Etsy, and it's called Vampire Lady with Big Hat Cosplay Patterns and Tutorials. So I'm assuming she didn't say Lady D's full name for possibly copyright issues, but if you look at this picture of the pattern and you look at the hat, you definitely know who this pattern is for and what dress you are making. This ring light is making my apartment hot. I had to turn my fan on. Hopefully you can't hear that. I am not gonna show any aspect of this pattern because I want to respect the person who made this pattern. I'm not gonna show any of the instructions. However, what you will see is how the different pattern pieces are cut out, because that is kind of, I can't avoid that. You'll see what the different pieces of the pattern are through the own patterns I had to cut out. However, no other aspect of this pattern will be shown to respect, of course, the person who made the pattern. This is not a pattern review video. However, if I were to give this pattern a review, I would give it 5 out of 5 pentacles. So there you go. What I also really love about this pattern is the creator goes over every single aspect of creating Lady D's cosplay. I did print it out, and that's because I prefer printing out patterns and looking at them rather than relying on my laptop that's gonna constantly go to sleep every time I'm not looking at it for like 5 minutes, and also prefer reading off of paper, I guess because I'm an English nerd who loves to read, so I just prefer having a hard copy of it. I print it out at home because if I would have printed it out at work, one, someone might have caught me printing out a 39-page PDF that did not relate to what my work does, and two, my work only has black and white ink, so here I was able to print it out in color because I'm also a visual learner, so I love things being color coordinated and I would prefer to have it in color. What I love about Pretzel Cosplay's pattern is she covers how you can make a very big hat. She gives you 3 different sizes you can make the hat in. She covers how to make her necklace. She covers how to make the dress, how to make her claws if you want to make them. The only thing she didn't cover was how to make Lady D's 3 roses. She just used a hairpin. However, I find that fair because one, in this tattoo I have of Lady D, the tattoo artist said that he could only do 1 rose or else the detail of the 3 roses wouldn't look completely right. And two, it's just a hair clip. That's super easy. It's a complicated process of making a dress like this. So therefore, why not just pin one big black rose hairpin on your dress? It makes one thing less complicated out of a cosplay. Can be very complicated to try and sew and make together. Another thing about this pattern, I don't think is a hindrance, but some people might find to be a hindrance, only comes in one size, and that's kind of in the LXL sizing, and it doesn't have seam allowance, so you need to add in your own seam allowance. What I did for that is, because I obviously have some things I need to worry about when it comes to sizing, because a typical XL tends not to fit me for obvious certain reasons, I just did two things. So for the first time ever, I did the first steps of making a mock-up. I didn't actually sew together the complete mock-up, but what I did is I printed out the pattern, taped it together, and then used this totally appropriate, not phallic looking at all, 12-inch curved ruler to help me draw out and make the pattern bigger. So just keep that in mind, that if you want to use this pattern, it comes in one size. However, if you have a ruler like this and use it to help create the patterns to fit your side, and I definitely recommend doing a mock-up for at least the under, because she also has an underdress for it, because you know it's white. White tends to stuff peek through sometimes. I would definitely recommend getting one of these totally appropriate, not weird looking at all, 12-inch curved rulers. I made this outfit to be my Halloween costume last October, and also it's a really good outfit to have for cons. She's a very recognizable and lovable villainess. The moment I played 8, I knew I just had to make this cosplay. I was that person who was rooting for Lady D the entire time. So anyways, back into the cosplay and not my review of one of my favorite games, Resident Evil Village. How I made this costume, where I started, and where I finished. I started with making Lady D's accessories. I didn't have the fabric yet, so I wanted to start with possibly the most simplest part of the cosplay, which was her necklace and her black 3 roses that represent her 3 daughters. So what I did for the roses is I found this black rose headband at Michael's. I ripped off 3 of the roses, and I don't know how to explain what I glued them onto. It was part of, I guess, a purse that I ripped apart that was made out of fake leather, but it also kind of had an animal print on it. That's the best I can describe it. So I made that circle small so that when I glued on the 3 roses, you couldn't see the rim of that circle on the outside of it. Glued on the 3 roses, and then on the back side, I put on a hair clip that you use to like kind of pull up your hair while you're dyeing the hair. So it didn't have any teeth on it either, so I could just simply pin it on my dress, and it also wouldn't ruin the fabric of the dress. And then the necklace, I got fake pearls from Michael's, and the main part, I actually saw this little pendant at a thrift store that I go to, and even though it doesn't look exactly like Lady D's pendant, I'm also a fan of saving as much money as you can while you're making a cosplay. I just painted that gray and strung it on the pearl necklace. Also, you'll notice that this pearl necklace has 3 strings as opposed to in some of the photos it only has 2, and that's because I made this necklace out of wire, and I guess the pearls might have been a little too heavy for the size wire I bought, even though I had to make sure that the wire fit through the pearls, because I also use I forgot what they're called, but I'll put the name on the screen when I'm editing. I also put these little clamps that you use to close the wire, and because the pearls were so heavy, they kept slipping through. I wanted to use wire because wire sits better and gives it more of that round effect. Also, right before I was about to go in on Saturday, when I put it around my neck, the top strand that didn't have the pendant on it fell apart again, and I was scrambling last minute trying to fix that necklace. So I definitely need to eventually redo the necklace. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I like how authentic it is making it yourself, and I think it kind of just matches the rest of my cosplay where almost everything is homemade or handmade. Pretzel Cosplay's pattern also provides a pattern for how you can make the necklace as well. All right, so like I said, I used this 12.5 curved ruler. Help me make the pattern to make sure it fits my body size. And this was the first time I did the starting steps of making a mock-up pattern, and that's because it wasn't in my side. So what I did was, I think I added 0.5 seam allowance, and then also included some extra space to fit my measurements. And what I did was I went to the thrift store, the same thrift store I bought that pendant from for the necklace. I got white sheets and then made a mock-up pattern out of that. And then what you see as the outside, the red lines, or in some of them, they're black lines. I think the red marker ran out of, the red or black marker ran out of ink. I don't remember which one it was. The outside, the line is the seam allowance, and then I transferred all the writing that was on the pattern to make sure that those cutout patterns would fit me. I sewed together the underdress, the patterns of the white bed sheet to make sure it fit. And also because I did that for only the undershirt, because Lady D has this beautiful gather in the front, it would be harder to tell if it fit me or not with this big gather in the front. So I did it with the underdress to make sure that then that's what I would have to fit to the gather. It worked out first try. I was totally surprised because that was the first time I ever tried making a pattern bigger to fit me. Also, another thing I love about this pattern that I forgot to mention is that this pattern in particular is made based off of stretch fabric, and it said to use stretch white fabric. So like I said, I was trying to save money on this pattern. So I decided to order some fabric off of Amazon, and I do not recommend this fabric I use. Not because it was hard to work with, it was fine to work with, but for two major reasons. One reason is that it is stretchy, but if you look at the reviews, a lot of people say it's not stretchy. It's only stretchy if you pull it a certain way. So if you sew it, say you don't, so it only pulls vertically, but say you sew it horizontally, then it's not gonna be stretchy fabric. So you need to make sure to check where the stretch is. And also the stretch isn't that great. It didn't have a lot of give to it. However, I still made it work at the end. The other thing about why I don't recommend this fabric is because I, at first, did not order enough. I went by what Pretzel Cosplay said in the pattern, like how much fabric the pattern recommended. Then I added a little bit more, knowing I needed to add in seam allowance and add in some extra space for my curves. But I still didn't order enough to make 2 sleeves. So I got my first order super fast. It was within the week that I got my first order. However, when I tried to order only 1 more yard, or was it 2? I don't remember if it's like Joann's and I had to order 2. It never came. So I was just sitting there with only 1 arm left to sew on this cosplay, and it never came. So I don't know what happened, and I think eventually I got a refund because I never got that fabric when I'm recording this in the beginning of May, and when I ordered it in October. I don't know. And I was doing it to try and save money. That was the kind of fabric I used, and in the end I had to go to Joann's and get the closest I could find to the fabric. The fabric I ended up using isn't as shiny as the dress, but I really looked and squinted their eyes, could see the difference. The instructions for this pattern are very easy to follow, and I didn't really run into too many hassles. Some people have issues sewing together stretchy fabric. What I kind of recommend for stretchy fabric is setting your spacing of how far apart your needle sews and threads and catches the bobbin. I set it to at least, I don't remember if it was a 1.5 or 2. I don't have a serger, but if you have a serger, I definitely recommend using one, just because it helps keep it all held together and makes the ends look pretty. So one of the things that I will admit that was kind of hard about making this cosplay, which I don't think was the pattern's fault, I just think it's generally hard to do, was doing that front gather I was talking about. I had this thing of I didn't want the front dress to connect to the underdress in the front. It did connect on the sides, they were sewn together, and that's because, as the pattern said, it helps if you sew the inner dress and the outer dress together. It prevents things from riding up.
Stops the suit from riding up.
Up where?
Just up.
And also, I was worried about my front curves, is the most, I guess, PG way I can put it. I was a little worried about that as well, and I wish I'd done a little better on the gather because I was so worried about it not fitting the front part that I gave it a little too much space and it doesn't fit tightly across my chest. It's not like a perfect fit is what I'm trying to say. In a lot of cases, that's usually how dresses that I don't make fit me, and I hate it when the chest area is too tight. And I do like that it was loose, but in the end, I would have liked it to be a little bit more fitted in the front. So that was actually, I think, like the hardest part to do because I measured it like 1,000 times to make sure it fit properly. It looked good when it hung well. Thank God I have my sewing mannequin burlesque, or else this process of making sure it was even and hung properly would have taken even longer because I would have had to put it on, make sure it was straight. If it wasn't, take it off, fix it again. So having a sewing mannequin helped so much in this process. And I understand not everyone could afford a sewing mannequin. Also, another thing I love about this pattern is it has pockets. Ugh, I love pockets, and that is definitely a need when you're at a convention. I hate it so much when my cosplays don't have pockets, and say I'm at a vending booth and I want to buy something and I am struggling to like put my phone somewhere. But with this dress, just pop that phone in my pocket, take out my wallet, and pay for the thing I want to buy. It makes life so much easier when your cosplay has pockets, or any dress has pockets. Another thing I also just love about this dress in general is Lady D's beautiful train that she has. Also, if you care about this, no matter what, your train, the back part of the train is going to drag on the floor. However, I just went under the belief that the more dirtier the bottom of the dress gets, the more accurate it is to the character, because her dress is very dirty at the bottom because of all of the wear and tear of her just walking around her beautiful castle. So yes, the bottom of my cosplay is dirty now, but I always just say the excuse, oh, well, it's just more accurate now. I decided not to weather it myself because I knew it would just get weathered by itself over time. And also, I'm not confident in my weathering abilities despite having an artist mom. I'd rather just let it weather on its own than doing it myself, if that makes sense. So after I finally figured out how I was going to do the gather in the front, I put on the final touches of sewing the hem of the bottom of the dress, adding on the fabric buttons. Basically what they are is fabric that you cut off a piece of circle or square for. The fabric buttons usually provide you a little piece of plastic or a little pattern for how much fabric you should cut off. And then you put it around the top of the button, gather it together, and then a useful tool to hammer the crap out of it to make sure it fits. That finished the final details of sewing, doing the final touches onto the dress. So, like I said, Pretzel Cosplay provides a pattern for the hat, and she has it available in 3 sizes. I originally was going to wear a bigger rimmed hat that I had from Killstar, but to me, trying to be authentic to the character, it just didn't look right having, in what will be compared to Lady D, such a small hat. Pretzel Cosplay had 3 different patterns available for how wide you wanted the rim of the hat, and of course, you know, I went for the biggest one because I wanted it to be as big as Lady D's hat is. The hat is made out of a very common material that is used for cosplaying. It is made out of UV foam. Yes, I possibly could have made this hat out of fabric, but this is the first time I have ever made a hat outside of crocheting a beanie or something made out of crochet. I have never made a hat before. It is a whole different technique, whole new set of skills you need to learn to make a hat. So I thought it was easiest to just make a hat out of UV foam. Another hiccup I kind of ran into is I went to 3 different crafting stores, and I don't know if it's because they didn't order enough or because it was October so other people were making their Halloween costumes, but every crafting store I went to was just completely out of V foam. At least the biggest, I think it's 5 millimeter. No, it's not 5 millimeters, 5 centimeters. Whatever the thickest foam is, no one had it. And you need the thicker foam to like make sure the hat doesn't droop too much. It does start to droop a little because it's so big, so gravity just starts to take over like the longer you wear it throughout the con. So that was another thing I had to order on Amazon, which was fine. The only thing is that it didn't come in one big sheet like it does when you buy it at a craft store. It came in one long row. So I ordered 2 of those rows to make sure I had enough. Taped them together with painter's tape when I cut out the pattern for the rim to make sure that was at least accurate. Of course, cut out the little different pieces for the hat. And so what one of the craft stores did end up having was cosplay foam clay. I used the foam to like kind of seal it in so it wasn't so obvious. I used contact glue. I think it's also known as contact cement. I forget. But the one thing about this is you need to make sure to use this glue outside. It is super potent. The fumes are super bad for you if you breathe them in. So I went to my parents' house to do this for the safety of me, my partner, and my cat. Also, my cat tries to eat anything that is not food that he can fit in his mouth. So that was another reason why I went to my parents, is I didn't want him accidentally licking anything toxic. Perks of having an orange cat, I guess. And so I made the hat at my parents' house because they live in a house. They have a nice big backyard where I can make this hat and glue it together. So I glued all the pieces together with contact glue. And then for the hat part, as you can see, I put the foam clay all over the top to kind of hide the edges of the different pattern. And also, it's probably something that happened when I cut it out. There was kind of a gap on top, so I covered that gap on top as well. The reason why you see a male mannequin head here instead of a female one is because my mom said I should get the male one because I have a big head, so it's more accurate. Thanks, Mom. I let it dry because that's the one thing about using contact glue and clay foam is you need to let it dry. And I honestly have zero patience when it comes to crafting, despite, needing to have patience when you craft. It probably comes from my ADHD. I don't know. So I put all the pieces together, put the clay foam on top, glued the top of the hat to the rim of the hat, also put the thinner pieces of UV foam on the top of the hat part that touches the rim to make it look like the fabric that Lady D has on the top of her hat that also Pretzel Cosplay recommends in their pattern. So I spray painted the hat with a combination of black spray paint that also had primer in it. And if you're wondering who this other person in the video is it is my mom. She has experience with spray paint, so I asked her to help me to spray paint it. Also, this spray paint, despite having primer in it, wasn't thick enough. So I also went over it with some acrylic black paint. And then also I think I put another spray paint of black on top of that to kind of let everything set. Alright, so her claws. Pretzel Cosplay does have not necessarily a pattern, but they do go over how they made their claws in it, and you can follow what they did. I personally kind of wanted to make much longer claws, so it took me a while to figure out how to make those claws. So the pattern says using thin UV foam that you can get at any craft store. I tried that didn't work out. I didn't like how it looked. Then I tried the thick UV foam, definitely didn't like how that looked. So then in the end, what I went with, I didn't end up working out in the end, not because of me, but because of reasons. What I ended up doing in the end for the Halloween party was using very thick felt and then sewing 2 layers of very thick felt. By the way, I didn't make these gloves. I bought these gloves off of Amazon. That's another thing, I've never made gloves before, nor do I want to make gloves because of the different, fingers. Like, no, I don't want to do that. So I would say that's the only thing of this cosplay that I did not make. I glued them onto the gloves, and that worked fine. It would have been perfect if someone at the party didn't party foul on the gloves and get them all wet with a certain alcoholic drink while I took them off to sit them on the table for literally 5 seconds to turn around to eat something. Next thing I knew, someone spilled an alcoholic drink on them. So I used fabric glue, and I don't know, I assumed fabric glue would hold it together. It didn't. So when I washed them the next day, the claws fell off. What I ended up doing in the end for the con that I went to this weekend was I just bought the cheapest Freddy Krueger claws I could find. I ripped off the Freddy Krueger claws and painted them black and super glued them to the glove. So in the end, all my efforts of trying to figure out how to freaking make the claws for Lady D didn't work out. I also put it on my left hand because I'm right-handed, so I wanted to be able to use my right hand whenever I needed to at a con. So that's why it's only on one hand and it's on my non-dominant hand. Another thing I learned about gloves is because phones are so touch sensitive now, you can't open your freaking phone when you have gloves on. And also when your other hand has claws on it, it's hard to take off this glove. So I had to pull the glove off a lot with my mouth, which according to one cosplayer at the con made me look like a Black Butler character. I don't know, I've never watched Black Butler, so I wasn't completely sure what they were referring to. So that is how I put together the Lady D cosplay. I think because of my day job, it took me about, I want to say, the start of October to the end of October to make everything combined. The hat definitely took longer than I thought it was going to make because I didn't take into account all of the drying that goes into gluing it together, the foam, and of course the paint. So I believe the dress took me 2 weeks in between, after I worked, and the hat took 2 weeks as well because of the same reason. Luckily, my parents were completely fine with me leaving the hat in the garage to let it dry. Also remember when you spray paint to put a canvas or newspaper down because that spray paint gets everywhere. Alright, so let's get into the con. Retro Gaming Con was very small. It's probably the smallest con I've been to. Saturday, there is surprisingly not that many cosplayers there. It's the Ontario Convention Center, their parking lots are kind of separated. So if the parking lot that's closest to the entrance of the center is filled, they'll make you park across the street. So it was very strange to walk across the street in this floor-length white dress with my 4-inch platforms on, and I didn't have the hat on because of the wind, so I was just holding it in my hands and having this giant hat walk across the street because no one else around me was in cosplay, and I felt kind of embarrassed. Once I got into the exhibit hall, there was definitely more people cosplayed. It was just not the usual amount that I expect to see. So I was thinking about going to this con for the cosplay competition because I put in a lot of hard work for this Lady D cosplay. I wanted to show it off a little bit, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. However, I decided to go because my queen, Lady D herself, Maggie Robinson, announced that she was going to be there. And the moment my friend sent me that post that Lady D was going to be there, I bought my ticket because I wanted to meet Lady D in my Lady D cosplay with my Lady D tattoo. I'm not obsessed. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyways, so that's the main reason why I went to this con, because Maggie Robinson herself was going to be there both days, and I wanted to wear my Lady D cosplay for the cosplay contest. If you've ever been to the Ontario Convention Center, it has this giant exhibit hall that they can cut in half. This con, like I said, was very small. They only used half of the exhibit hall, and then they used 2 rooms across the hall for the panel. So that also shows you how small it was, that there was only 2 rooms for the panels. And Ontario Convention Center, it's a very big convention center. It definitely has a lot more space than what they were using, but of course, I know it's also a matter of like renting out space. It's a small con. It was also the easiest I've ever walked through the row of cons because it was so small. There was like, I didn't have to worry about brushing up against people. I consider myself short at 5'5", so I wanted to be taller. So I believe the platforms I wore were like 4 to 5 inches, so I could at least be closer to 6 feet. You would think it would be hard usually walking around with a giant hat in platforms, but because it was such a small con, it was very easy to walk through the rows. It was very nice to like not have to like cramp up between a bunch of people walking through rows. I also ran into a technique of how to walk through the rows with a hat. Was her hat kind of slouched anyway, it's how she wears it. So I would slouch it this way and then hold it with the hand that has the claws to make sure it wouldn't fall off. Because that's something I forgot to mention, is when I made this hat, is I measured it to be big enough for my head, but I didn't take into account that I would be wearing a wig cap, and my hair is very thick. I have a lot of hair, so all my hair bunched up in a wig cap with a wig on top of it. So it didn't fit around the brim of my head. So I would just place it on my head and it would just stay. So that was nice that it just stayed. So the first thing I did for the con, first I signed up for the cosplay contest because I wasn't really sure like how much time you needed to sign up right before it. We signed up the same day the contest was happening, but then they loved my Lady D cosplay and they said, "Are you gonna go meet Maggie?" And I'm like, right after this, I am meeting Maggie. And it was on the same row, so I just made a beeline to where Maggie was, and I got in line in my Lady D cosplay. And let me just say, Maggie Robinson is the sweetest person in the world. I love her so much. She is 6 feet tall, which we love a tall queen. She's also like a theater kid, which I love. So she has her master's in theater. As a former theater kid, I was in theater in high school. Theater kids just know, like, they can just sense when they're around other theater kids. So she was just a very funny, very cute, the easiest person to talk to. She spent time talking to you. It wasn't just like, sign, okay, next, sign, okay, next. I talked to her for like 10 minutes, I think. She also has a very adorable character named Vampy that she drew on my little thing that I had signed. And she's the nicest person in the world. I love her so much. She loved my Lady D cosplay. Said I nailed it. She said she loved how big I made the hat. And she said I made the House of Dimitrescu very proud. So I don't know. I don't know what else to say about Maggie. She's just an amazing person. After I met her, I kind of had some time before the contest. So because I was in platforms, this was one of the few times that I decided to sit down for most of the con. And because it was a small con, there was actually chairs available for you to sit in. Met a bunch of cool other cosplayers, a bunch of other cool people at the con, and then talked to a bunch of cool people. This is the most I've ever gotten asked for people to have pictures of me in my cosplay before. If you see me in a cosplay and you really like my cosplay, please don't feel shy to ask me. I am awkward. I am still trying to figure out what to do with my face, like in pictures, because I'm very insecure about my face. But I don't care. Like, you're taking a photo of me because you love what I made. how you love the cosplay I'm wearing. So even no matter how awkward my face is or how weird the angle looks, I will take a picture for you because I just love my work being appreciated. It took a lot to make this cosplay. Oh, also, because I wasn't gonna buy anything this day because it would have been hard to carry anything with like having to make sure that hat was secure. So I was just walking through the rows to look, to like see what I would want to get the next day. And I ran into the most amazing cosplayer. She was cosplayed as Cassandra. And because she was cosplayed as my daughter, we kind of just like, were like, oh, you're amazing. I ran into her again when I went to walk to the cosplay contest. And throughout the entire cosplay contest, we just hung out. She was so cool. She was so sweet. We were geeking out about Lady D and other Resident Evil stuff. We also ran into other Resident Evil cosplayers there. There's 2 Leons, 2 Jills, there was Cassandra, and there was a Rose. They were a great group of people. We also took a bunch of group photos together. I've never gone to a con by myself before, but I definitely recommend it because you run into so many cool, like-minded people, especially if you're in cosplay, who have the same interests as you, who are the nicest people in the world, who you can just have fun with, dorking out with something that you all love and you all have in common. These Resident Evil cosplayers were one of the greatest people I've ever met at a con. And even the other cosplayers, I love hanging out with them. I love being dorks with them. Even though I'm in my 30s now, it definitely made me feel like a kid again. Though I will admit, being around all these 20-year-old cosplayers, like, and my feet is hurting and my back is killing me because I'm in my 30s. I'm just like, definitely feel like I'm embracing Lady D of being the mother of the Resident Evil cosplay group.
How do you do, fellow kids?
But you know, I kind of felt weird being in my 30s now and cosplaying, but you know the saying, do what you love. Ever since I was a kid, I love dressing up. I love making costumes. I love cosplaying. And like even drag queens experience the same thing. Drag queens do it for as long as their bodies are capable for, or even longer. They'll do it because they love it. And that's what I love about cosplay. I love the same thing that kind of follows along with the things of drag. Dressing up, performing, and being with a bunch of other like-minded people who love the same thing that you love. Let's get into the cosplay contest. So, the cosplay contest was surprisingly in the smaller room. And so I mentioned the 2 panels, that they had 2 rooms for panels. And it was very confusing because it was panel room A and panel room B. So it was confusing because, like I said, they were only using half of the exhibit hall. So it's technically 2 rooms. So they have exhibit hall A, which is where the con was happening, and exhibit hall B. And then they have this giant circle and room that says like B. That wasn't room B. Then when you walk over to the 2 rooms they were using, it said 100B, and then the other room they were using just said, I think like 104, and then the room right next to it said 104A, I think. I'm like doing this off at the top of my memory. Room 100B was room A, and then just room 104 that was right next to room 104A was room B. So it was very confusing where the cosplay contest was, and a lot of people got confused because they didn't know where the cosplay contest was. And it definitely wasn't the fault of the people running the cosplay contest. They were even like, they just put us in this room. So that was a little confusing. We eventually figured it out. Some other fellow cosplayers like helped direct anybody else who was in cosplay to where the cosplay contest was. And then some of the other 2 judges who were in charge of the panel went out and went to room A to make sure nobody else was confused that room B was where the cosplay contest was going to be. So after figuring all that out and being confused of which room is which, they did pre-judging, which is where they lined us up and asked us about our cosplays. Just like took us off in the corner and asked us about it. I was first because I was sitting in the corner of the first row. So they said this row first, Lady D first. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm getting judged first. So they asked you about your making process. Where did you get everything? because they wanted to know about the process of how you made your costume. So I said I made everything except the gloves, I made the hat, I made the dress. These are Freddy Krueger claws. And so then we had to wait for them to prejudge every individual. And then after that, there was performance points. So we lined up, and the people who actually wanted to come and see the panel came in to watch the cosplay contest. So we lined up. Me and the person cosplaying as Cassandra walked together because it just made sense. Even the girl who was dressed as Peach was behind me, and she's like, "Do you want to have your daughter walk with you?" And I'm like, "Yes, I want to have my daughter walk with me." So we walked together. I just like walked out in the middle in my little Lady D strut, and I was like, "Daughter, come!" And like she ran up to me and was like, "Yes, mother." And so we walked together. We were towards like kind of the middle end, if that makes sense, like the people who went up and walked. And so everyone walked. So after we did the parade, or the lineup, whatever you want to call it, they announced the winners. They had 3 judge favorites. Each judge had a favorite. And then they had 3rd, 2nd, and 3rd place. I got 3rd place for my Lady D cosplay. 2nd place was a Cloud who 3D printed his own sword, his sword was amazing. And he also did Cloud's hair. And he said it was the first time he ever styled a wig. He never styled a wig before that. And Cloud's hair is hard to do. So I appreciate that was the first time he ever styled Cloud's wig. And then the person before that was a combination of a Boba Fett and a One Piece character. Don't come at me. I don't watch One Piece. I tried watching it and I just can't dedicate myself to 1,000 episodes right now. But he was a combination of Boba Fett and a One Piece character who like basically built his own armor, and his armor stuck to him with magnets. And even one of the judges said it's very hard to do Mandalorian armor, and the fact that it was just magnets that stuck to him was like very clever. And he even had a wig on and had makeup on. The helmet even had a speaker in it, so you could hear him talk when he talked. That cosplay is amazing. I'm so glad he got 1st place. But anyways, they said the reason why I got 3rd place was because they were really impressed by the fact that the hat didn't fit on my head perfectly and it was just balancing. One judge was impressed by that. The other judge was impressed by the fact that I made the entire dress myself. And they just liked, one of the judges said that they know how hard it is to work with like the slippery stretch fabric and the fact that it had no zippers. But you know, a lot of people find sewing hard, which I understand. It's hard. That sewing machine can betray you. It can like clog, and like I get why people hate sewing. Like sewing is the thing I need for my mental health. It's how I meditate. It's how I get through life sometimes. Same thing with crochet. Even though it takes time and it takes a while to do, I love sewing and I find sewing very relaxing. So I was surprised that they were talking about how hard it is to sew that fabric, and I'm like, I didn't have that many issues. I love sewing. Like it wasn't that big of a deal, but okay, thank you. I only took 1 sewing class. I'm mostly self-taught. I've been doing this for, God, more than 10 years. So I gotta remember I'm in my 30s now. And it was just nice to like feel appreciated. I have very bad self-confidence, so no matter how much I like sew and how much practice I get in, I never really thought I was a good seamstress. Winning this contest really helped me feel validated that, oh, maybe I am actually good at something in this crazy thing we call life. And you know, it just helped me feel appreciated that I was actually possibly a good seamstress in the end. Like, cosplay isn't about entering a contest. It's about having fun and dressing up and meeting with like-minded people. And I wasn't expecting Resident Evil to have such a big presence at that con, but one, it was a retro gaming con, and we're at the point where games like Pokemon that came out when I was a kid are considered retro now. Oh, it makes me feel so old. And the original Resident Evil games, not the remakes, are considered retro. So, and also, The wonderful Maggie Robertson was there, who plays Lady D. One of the actors who plays Jill Valentine was there. The 4th remake came out earlier this year. So, in hindsight, it makes sense that there was a lot of Resident Evil cosplayers there. And then I met Maggie Robertson's a second time. I also forgot to mention, she also signed my tattoo just to, like, you know, for fun. And her manager also ended up taking a picture of her signature on my tattoo because he loved it so much. Now, also on Saturday, she had a panel, and I went to that panel as well. And because there was, like, so few people in it, it definitely felt more like a Q&A that was like a conversation between us and the audience. And like I said, she's the nicest person. I love her so much. Definitely follow her on social media and follow her Vampy character as well. She drew her Vampy characters on both of my posters. Great fun time. I wasn't expecting to have that much fun going by myself on Saturday, but ended up meeting a lot of cool cosplayers and had fun with them. And then the second day I went with my friends, had fun with them that day. And overall, even though there was some confusion with which room was what, which room was room A and which room was 1B, still had a lot of fun. I would recommend going to small cons, like a lot more intimate, easier to move through, and you end up meeting a lot of cool, like-minded people. So if you're scared to go to a con, definitely go to a small con for the first time and work your way up to the bigger cons. Don't do what I did, where AX was the first con you ever went to and was so overwhelmed by the amount of people and lines there. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video about the process of me making my Lady D cosplay and about me going to the Retro Gaming Con and all the cool people I met there. I will catch you next time.